Welcome back to Rubbin Minds. So, is social media the right tool for accountability? Is this the right way, the right path for us to be able to hold our leaders and various individuals of different statuses in the country to, is this the best way for us to hold them accountable for their various actions or deeds or things they say? I mean, this cancel culture mentality, is this the right way forward? I mean, the right probes, the way they move into various topics, is this the right approach? Because still, we're not so sure if it has the effects, the desired effect that we planned for. Coming with us live on Skype today, we have Mr. David on Skype. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you.
Yeah. So, David, the cancel culture. Would you say it is a tool that is being used right and to the right, is it used to the right extent of its power or to its right potential that it's seen for?
Well, first of all, it's important to point out that without an existing power imbalance in the offline world, the so-called cancel culture wouldn't even need to exist. It only exists because either the justice system or the law enforcement system or some other offline social system is not working properly. So people feel like the way to get some measure of justice is through social media campaigns. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, it is not the ideal way through which disputes should be solved, through which crimes should be reported, through which people should be held accountable. And I think it's only in dysfunctional societies like Nigeria, that social media has become like the point of first call whenever there's some kind of grouse. And because people feel as if the Nigerian police or the Nigerian judicial system is not going to give them the results or the justice that they want. So in the first place, they go to social media. Now, that has its advantages, I have to say. So, for example, in the case of female sexual harassment, which has been an ongoing issue for decades, and Nigerian women sort of learned to just live with it, and there wasn't really anything they could do about it. The advent of the so-called cancel culture on social media actually went some way toward rolling back the tide. For the first time in a generation or two, they actually had a voice. And for the first time, men who previously didn't have to listen, they didn't want to, were forced to listen, which ordinarily should be the job of the justice system. Conversely, on the other hand, as it always happens with humans, wherever something that can be used for good comes into existence, someone always finds a way to turn it into something that can be used for something bad as well. So,
Speaking of which, there's a way you put that there, the ways whenever good things come into existence, someone always finds a way to abuse it. So are you trying to say you think that people are beginning to use this cancel culture for their own personal gain? Are they using it to further their own agendas or their own missions, or to tarnish people's images to favor theirs instead?
Yeah, well, ordinarily that shouldn't be the case, but I think it would be very dishonest to say that is not happening. That absolutely is happening right now. I think we all saw the story a couple of weeks ago where a man who pretty much wasn't given any opportunity to defend himself or to state his side of the story was placed on a list that basically identified him as a sexual predator. And he felt as if his life was ruined, his life was over, and he had no way of rolling back the tide of public opinion. And he committed suicide, he killed himself. And obviously, the fact that he killed himself in itself doesn't necessarily mean that he wasn't guilty. But I mean, I would strongly suspect that someone who actually, did the thing they were accused of wouldn't go as far as killing themselves if, to try and make a point about their false innocence. I personally believe he didn't do it. And that's what I mean when I say that social media cancel culture has been weaponized, has been turned into an instrument to further people's individual agenda. And that's how it happens with humans in general. Whenever humans are given the opportunity to use a tool that can go both ways, it always happens that some people always use it in a double-edged way. So I remember a couple of years ago, there was a there was a big furore on social media. There was a popular actress who claimed that she was almost raped by her Uber driver. And the whole Twitter, myself included, went into a like total uproar, until I had a chance to interact with the person in question. And it turned out that the story that she put out there was completely different to what actually happened. But so what then happens is that the person who has the bigger voice on social media ends up dominating the conversation and ends up basically deciding what is true and what isn't, which is not supposed to be the case. That's supposed to be the judge of the law court. So ultimately, I think there needs to be a conversation about how the Nigerian judicial system is failing and how it needs to be revamped, because using social media in lieu of courts can only end badly.
Okay, going off what you said, that a couple of weeks ago, a young man took his life as regards a claim against him as for being on a sexual predator list. That was how you put it, right? If that was the way, because I mean, if they went after this man for all that, do you really think that people are bothered that they are being cancelled on social media for things they have done, things they are doing? Because if that were to be the case, I don't see how this corruption thing would be able to elude this cancel culture, wouldn't you say? At least if you go after somebody that is not right, that is corrupt, with this same mindset, I mean, that means there should be justice served in the end now. What do you think?
So I think it's important to distinguish between using social media to hold people accountable to an extent and using social media as a tool for canceling people. Those are two completely different things. The people who do, I'm in the first category, right? Because even in the journalism and civil society space, we do quite a bit of that. The second category, on the other hand, is where people weaponize the potential of social media to ruin somebody's life and use it exclusively to further an agenda that may or may not be true. That's what I have a problem with. So, and eventually what will happen if this keeps on happening and if the legal system doesn't step up and fill in the gap that social media is filling in a very haphazard and poorly actioned manner, what is going to happen eventually is that people are eventually going to stop taking the whole thing serious altogether, because eventually people will simply say, oh, it's social media people trying to cancel me. It's not true. If more and more of these cases keep on occurring like this, where people are weaponizing social media for their personal agenda, eventually nobody's going to take it serious anymore. Everybody's going to think that anything that comes up on social media is for the sake of an agenda. So as you said, eventually even the politicians or the rapists or whoever are simply going to not care anymore, because nobody is going to be moved by what happens on social media. So before it gets to that point, before social media loses its capacity to be a force for good, and it just starts being discredited like so many other things before it, the legal system, and by the way, not just in Nigeria, this is happening all over the world as well. The law enforcement and judicial systems all over the world need to have a serious conversation about where they are failing and why people feel the need to jump onto social media to report certain things before going through the prescribed legal process.
Okay, well, I think most people just put these things on social media, so there's a timestamp that this is what happened at a particular point in time, so let's be able to have reference back to it. And still speaking about this cancel culture, do you think it has birthed more politically correct people? Like people, well, they always want to be politically correct, or it has given them a rethink to be able to open their minds to a larger picture, to a much more diverse conversation?
I think it has done the exact opposite of either of those two things. I think it has weaponized people's insecurities, people's fear, people's guilt, and made them even more reactionary, even more conservative, even less progressive than they were before. So, for example, in the case of people weaponizing social media to use, like the young man whose name was placed on the sexual predators list because somebody didn't like him. So men see things like this happen because, as I'm made to understand, this isn't the first time that something like that is happening, and something like that has actually happened to me before. Although it wasn't an allegation of sexual abuse, it was an allegation of physical abuse. Someone went up on Twitter and, oh, this guy who used to beat his ex-wife, and that was completely made up, and he got like 400 retweets, right? So what tends to happen when people start acting like that on social media is that the people who are on the receiving end of such actions end up developing a thicker skin. And if they were actually guilty of the things, or if some other people were actually guilty of these things that they're being accused of, they end up counterattacking with double force. They end up becoming even worse. And because it's like, well, you've already cancelled me. I'm already a terrible person, so I might as well really, I don't think it's really, which is the real danger in all of this. Like, it's making the world, it's social media is supposed to bring the world together. You know, amongst other things, cancel culture is contributing to actually making the world a bigger. It's not making it more creating more than what it is, because now people are like, well, everybody has to create their own little tribe. This group of people doesn't like me. This group of people is trying to cancel me. This group of people is trying to ruin my life. So I have to create my own tribe or find my own tribe somewhere so that they can protect me, they can defend me. So everybody is factionalizing themselves into these little groups and cliques. And we see this happen on social media a lot.
So you're saying it's more or less like people are supposed to have their various clans on social media to be able to defend them at the right time, or stand or speak for them, or help them out of different type of things. So because I mean, when the bashing comes and the dragging and all of that, you need a certain amount of a number of voices to help aid in your ply. Because once they band up against you, there's nothing only you as a person can do unless you have a fan base, so to speak, or a following of idealistic people in your direction that can help. Okay, I think we get that message. Thank you very much, David, for your contributions as regards this. Yeah. So that was David on the conversation of cancel culture and social media. I mean, these are the kind of things that we need to put into perspective. Everybody have their own various perspective as to how they handle information and how they process it and how they distribute it. So when you come online and you put out a message, be sure about the facts and be sure that you're not just coming to damage a person's image just because of soul hate. There have to be facts behind this thing.